In 2024, tensions in the Red Sea reached a breaking point. Commercial cargo ships were being attacked by drone boats and missiles. But some of those vessels weren't what they appeared to be. Hidden beneath innocent-looking containers were defensive systems ready to strike back. It's a tactic as old as naval warfare itself. The disguise, the trap. The moment when a helpless victim becomes a predator. Over a century ago, during World War I, the British Royal Navy perfected this art of deception. They created ships that looked like rusty cargo haulers, unarmed and vulnerable. German U-boat commanders would surface, ready for an easy kill. And then the sky opened up. Hidden panels dropped, guns swung into position. The hunter became the hunted. Welcome to the story of the Q ships, the ghost vessels that changed submarine warfare forever. The year is 1914. World War I has just begun, and Britain faces an existential threat, not from armies on land, but from something lurking beneath the waves. German U-boats, submarines, are strangling Britain's supply lines. Every day, merchant ships carrying food, ammunition, and fuel are being torpedoed and sent to the bottom of the Atlantic. Britain is an island nation. Cut off the supplies, and the war is over. In 1915 alone, U-boats sank over 750,000 tons of Allied shipping. By 1917, that number had skyrocketed to over 6 million tons. Britain was 3 weeks away from running out of food. The Royal Navy had destroyers and cruisers, but the ocean is vast. U-boats could strike anywhere, at any time. And early submarine detection technology was primitive at best. Sonar didn't exist yet. Depth charges were just being developed. The British needed a new strategy, something unconventional, something the Germans would never see coming. Enter the Q ship. Q stood for query, as in, what is that ship? They were also called mystery ships or decoy vessels. The concept was brilliantly simple. Take an ordinary-looking cargo hauler or fishing trawler, arm it with hidden naval guns, and use it as bait. When a U-boat surfaced to attack, and they often did surface to conserve torpedoes by using their deck guns, the Q ship would drop its disguise and open fire. It was deception warfare at its finest, and it was about to become one of the most dangerous assignments in naval history. Let's talk about how a Q ship actually worked.
First, you needed the right vessel. It couldn't look military. It had to appear old, slow, and completely harmless. The British would take merchant ships, fishing trawlers, even old colliers, cold transport ships, and convert them in secret. They'd install hidden gun emplacements behind false deck panels, cargo hatches, and collapsible bulwarks. Some Q ships carried 4-inch naval guns. Others had 12-pounders. The guns were painted to match the ship's color scheme and covered with tarps or wooden crates. The crew was Royal Navy, volunteers only. These men had to be exceptional actors. When a U-boat was spotted, they would perform what was called the panic party routine. Here's how it worked. The moment a U-boat surfaced, part of the crew would rush around the deck in fake panic, launching lifeboats, waving their arms, abandoning ship. They'd even carry props, caged parrots, suitcases, anything to sell the illusion of terrified merchant sailors fleeing for their lives. Meanwhile, the hidden gun crews stayed concealed below decks, waiting. The U-boat would approach, thinking it was safe to finish off the defenseless cargo ship with gunfire instead of wasting a torpedo. And that's when the trap sprung. The white ensign, the flag of the Royal Navy, would shoot up the mast, the false panels would drop, the guns would swing out and open fire at point-blank range. One of the most famous Q-ship captains was Commander Gordon Campbell. In 1917, his ship, HMS Farnborough, was disguised as a tramp steamer. On February 17th, they encountered U-83. The German submarine surfaced and began shelling the Farnborough. Campbell ordered the panic party to abandon ship, while he and the hidden gun crews stayed below, taking hit after hit. The ship was on fire. Men were wounded, but Campbell waited. He needed the U-boat to come closer. Finally, at 800 yards, Campbell gave the order. The white ensign rose, the guns appeared, and in less than 5 minutes, U-83 was blown apart and sinking. Campbell was awarded the Victoria Cross, Britain's highest military honor. But Q-ship operations were brutally dangerous. These crews were often outnumbered and outgunned. If the U-boat stayed submerged and used a torpedo, the Q-ship had no defense. Many Q-ships were sunk before they could even reveal their weapons. And if the disguise failed, if the Germans suspected a trap, the U-boat would simply dive and torpedo the ship from underwater. Game over. There was also a moral gray area. Under international law, warships were supposed to fly their national flag. Q-ships operated under false flags, technically making them pirates. If captured, Q-ship crews could be executed rather than treated as prisoners of war. But the stakes were too high. Britain was starving. The U-boat threat had to be stopped. Between 1915 and 1918, Q-ships sank or damaged around 14 confirmed U-boats. That might not sound like much, but the psychological impact was enormous. German U-boat commanders became paranoid. Every merchant ship could be a trap. They stopped surfacing as often. They wasted precious torpedoes on ships that might have been sunk with gunfire. Their effectiveness dropped. One of the most famous Q-ship actions was HMS Dunraven versus UC-71 in August 1917. The battle lasted over an hour. The Dunraven was hit multiple times, fires raged across the deck, ammunition was cooking off, but the crew refused to abandon the ruse. Eventually, the ship was so badly damaged that it had to be abandoned for real. But the German submarine had been damaged too and limped back to port. The captain of Dunraven, Gordon Campbell again, received a bar to his Victoria Cross, meaning he won it twice. But as the war dragged on, U-boat tactics evolved. The Germans became more cautious. They started attacking from deeper depths, using periscopes and torpedoes exclusively. The Q-ship's effectiveness diminished. By 1918, with the introduction of convoy systems, destroyer escorts, and improved depth charges, the U-boat threat was finally being contained through more conventional means. The Q-ships had served their purpose. They bought Britain time when time was running out. So what happened after World War I? The Q-ship concept didn't disappear. During World War II, both Britain and the United States attempted to revive it. The British operated several Q-ships in the early years of the war, hoping to catch German U-boats off guard again. But the Germans had learned their lesson. U-boat commanders in WW2 were far more cautious, and sonar technology had improved dramatically. The U.S. Navy also experimented with Q-ships in the Atlantic and Caribbean. One vessel, USS Attic, disguised as a merchant freighter, encountered U-123 in March 1942. But the battle didn't go as planned. The U-boat torpedoed Attic before it could respond, and the entire crew was lost. The age of the Q-ship was over. Submarines had become too advanced, too cautious, and too deadly.
But the legacy of deception warfare lived on. Today, the concept has evolved into something far more sophisticated. Modern naval vessels use stealth technology, electronic warfare, and cyber deception to hide their true capabilities. During the Cold War, Soviet trawlers would operate near U.S. naval bases, but they weren't fishing boats. They were intelligence-gathering vessels, packed with surveillance equipment. In the 1980s, the U.S. Navy considered disguising Aegis cruisers as container ships to get closer to Soviet targets. The idea was shelved, but it shows that the Q-ship mindset never truly died. And remember the opening of this video? In 2024, reports emerged of commercial vessels in conflict zones being equipped with defensive systems. Drones, electronic countermeasures, even point defense weapons, all hidden beneath civilian exteriors. The tactic has come full circle. But here's the deeper lesson. The Q-ships weren't just about sinking U-boats. They were about psychology. They were about making the enemy question everything. Is that a harmless cargo ship, or is it a trap? In warfare, uncertainty is a weapon, and the Q-ships weaponized uncertainty like nothing before them. Let's return to the men who crewed these ships. They volunteered for one of the most dangerous jobs in naval history. They sailed into U-boat-infested waters in vessels that looked defenseless because they were supposed to look defenseless. They had to be perfect actors, perfect gunners, and perfect sailors, all at the same time. Many of them died. Some Q-ships were torpedoed before they ever fired a shot. Others were blown apart in the middle of battle. The casualty rate was staggering. But they changed the war. They forced German U-boats to change tactics. They bought Britain precious time. They proved that sometimes the best weapon isn't the biggest gun or the fastest ship. It's the one your enemy never sees coming. Gordon Campbell, the most successful Q-ship commander, summed it up best. He said, "The whole essence of Q-ship work was to be attacked. We had to be hit before we could hit back." Think about that. Their job was to be shot at, to absorb damage, to bleed, and only then, only when the enemy thought they were helpless, to strike. It's a level of courage that's hard to comprehend. Today, the Q-ships are mostly forgotten. There are no grand memorials, no blockbuster movies, just a footnote in naval history. But every time a modern warship uses deception, every time a drone disguises itself as something harmless, every time a military force uses misdirection to gain an advantage, they're following in the wake of those rusty, unassuming cargo ships that dared to fight back. They thought it was a cargo ship, until the sky opened up. And in that moment, the hunter became the hunted.